Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I am Mike Mateen. And this may come across on the video, but this is from my dog, not from
Oh no, what happened?
get into a fight. Just we were playing rough, and he kind of punched me in the face, and his toenails we had just clipped them ourselves, so they had kind of like a rough edge to them.
Yeah.
Because they're not grinded, they're like clipped.
Sure.
So when he punched me and hit me in the face, it gave me almost a little bit of a black eye, and then also the cut.
Yeah, so, that can happen.
Yep, he was being rough, but I started it, so.
Well, those of you watching the video, I get to also point at my face because I got new glasses.
They look nice. I like those.
Thanks. The frames are kind of bigger and more sort of, I don't know, dramatic, I guess, than my old ones. That seems to be the style these days. The other thing that I will note for everybody, just in case you detect a difference in my mannerisms, is that I am on cold medicine right now, which I usually don't take because it makes me crazy. So I'm not promising to be crazy. I'm just saying I might be slightly more scattered than usual.
Got it.
All right. So this was... there's been so many episodes, I think, this season that we describe as a good episode despite not liking the outcome.
I was actually okay with this outcome, even though I like Zeke. I think it was a fitting way for him to go.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I only just didn't want him to go because I want him to still be on the show because I like him. But at the same time, I don't think it was the wrong decision for any of the people who decided to do it. They wanted to get him out because he was a threat, and they're right, he was, and it was a good move for them. So,
right. I mean, it became impossible, I think, for as much as Sarah wanted him around, for her to argue with them that there was once he had confided in her that his intention was to just vote off Andrea in 2 episodes. It made it very difficult to not, when Andrea's like, yeah, I mean, I think he's going to start coming after us soon. Sarah had proof of that, so it's hard to be like, no, he's definitely on board. Because he ended up being like, no, he's actually told me that he's not. So if both you and Sari, my two tightest alliance partners after I flipped, I either just flip back, but then what does that do for my game? I try to stick with Zeke, but he's made it pretty clear that he's not sticking with this alliance. So I guess I kind of got to go along with it. There just wasn't there wasn't really anywhere else to go with it from anybody's perspective. I think even Zeke saw that.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, that was smart of them. I was going to do it in 2 episodes.
Yeah. Well, it's weird how, in retrospect, we have almost like a weird anti-cause and effect story, or almost one of those almost like time travel where the cause and effect becomes reversed or something like that. I'm more like a prophecy sort of thing, in the sense that the reason Zeke was voted off is because of the reaction from Sari and Andrea to his behavior, which he did because he was worried that Sari and Andrea would vote him off. So he kind of was accurate in his prediction, but his response to the prediction is what made it happen.
Right.
So it's one of those the path a man takes to avoid his future. What's that saying? It's like a Buddhist Zen saying or something like that. A man meets his future on the path he takes to avoid it, or something like that. Fate, not future. Meets his fate on the path he takes to avoid it. It's something like that. But just the idea that, if you think you see something coming and you're trying to actively avoid it, you may find that it's your decisions that you take with that aim that actually produced the original outcome that you were worried about.
Yeah, it looks like a proverb. One meets his destiny often on the road he takes to avoid it.
That's it. I think it's been paraphrased in a number of different places.
Yes, yeah, and I think I don't even know if that's the official. That's just one that came up in the quick Googling.
Yeah. So in any case, though, I think Zeke's prediction that Suri and Andrea would eventually turn on him kind of fits that category, right? I mean, that is one half of the reason that he originally decided to turn against Andrea, and the other was, namely, they're bigger threats than Brad and Sierra, so he would rather be at the end with Brad and Sierra if that's the choice, because he thinks he has a better chance of beating them. So, but it's kind of interesting. I really hope, though, that, after the season, especially now that, Zeke is off the show anyway, I hope that they don't still have any kind of a grudge going there, just because I was actually very happy with Andrea's play this episode, but she really does seem to still be holding that emotional grudge in her heart.
Yes.
In a way that seems like they've not been able to resolve that between them. One quick note before we jump into like the scene by scene is that we have a comment from a new listener on the website for the last episode. It just came in today. And if I can pull it up and not just right now, I have like the preview, which is like the first half of the sentence. This is from Daisy, and she says, "First time catching your podcast. I notice you like to go a bit more in depth on topics, and that's something I enjoy. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts and opinions with lovers of the game."
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate feedback. We do it because we're lovers of the game too, and this is the kind of conversation we like. So it's like a bonus when anybody else likes it too.
Yep.
So let's jump to the beginning of the episode then. Unless you had any more general comments you wanted to get to first.
No.
Okay. So we came back to camp. It's very quiet because we have basically half the or maybe a little less than half of the camp has suddenly revealed that things are not as they had thought they were. They thought they were on the top of the world, and now they realize they're on the bottom. And Brad is talking about that reversal of fortune and how quickly it changes. Sarah seems oddly eager to confess that she was the flip, volunteering it without really even being asked, which I'm not really sure what she was hoping for there, but I don't think it was a problem. I think it would have been, it would have come out.
Basically, like just so she didn't have to keep it to herself.
Yeah, she just kind of had all this nervous energy from the people she had been telling she was with them are all bummed now. And it's going to be hard to keep it a secret if anyone really wants to find out. And things are all going to be remixed now anyway. So it makes sense to tell, but she just seems really like eager to get it out there.
Yeah, I mean, she probably felt bad and it didn't want to like have it be awkward and like people are like, she didn't want to have to be asked about it. She just wanted to put it out there, like to just kind of get that out of her system. And I thought it was fine. I mean, like I said, I think it was more just like a pressure release for her than it was anything, more strategic, or I don't think there was any, gamesmanship behind it. It was just like, I just really feel like I want to tell everybody, so I'm going to tell everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that having made a big move like that at the tribal council, her mind is just buzzing with the energy of that. She's not, it's kind of like when, you do something really big and exciting right before bed, you're not ready to sleep yet. Excuse me. So the other thing that I thought was interesting in this little bit is Zeke saying that the reason Debbie was the target is because she seemed like she was the one in charge. Now, as we talked about last time, I think our working theory was Debbie was the one with the mouth on her, and since they needed Sarah to flip, Debbie was the one that Sarah seemed willing to vote for.
Yes. And Debbie was starting to become a little confident and cocky, and they felt like they needed to kind of cut that out to splinter up the group. And this was the start here of what I thought was a very interesting theme of this episode from a social dynamic standpoint, especially in the current, political climate. And I don't, I'm not, obviously we're not here to discuss politics, but the concept. So I'll just to take us back to last week, one of the reasons we felt like it was so good for Sarah to leave that solid majority and join the minority and make it the new majority was that it was a little bit more dynamic. It wasn't as solid of a group, and it allowed for more freedom in maneuvering, and that's kind of how they were acting. Right. But then once they flipped into the 6-4 majority, they started to behave exactly the same way as the group before.
Yeah.
And that's why I say in this, when I talk about in the political climate, like you start to see a lot of things as, as the houses have become more in the news. You're seeing behaviors now out of the majorities in both the House and the Senate that were exact things that they were complaining about when they were in the minority, and will, if once they inevitably speak again, will exactly happen again. Which is why, there was, some hubbub about, trying to change the Senate to a simple majority on everything. And it's like, that is a terrible idea always, because that House changes so, just goes through cycles. You don't want to put it in a position where someone only needs a simple majority, or just like literally the country will just go like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was interesting to see that reflected in the way that they behaved in this game, and that's why I said it's not about whatever the decisions they're making. It's just very interesting that the attitudes and things have completely flipped from whenever the majorities were flipped, which I think was like 4 years ago. The other way, and now. Oh,
see, for a second I thought you had gone ahead and switched back to talking about Survivor.
No. So it's all sort of the same, but that's part of why we like Survivor, is that the extrapolation into real world social dynamics and how group behavior and group think and human interactions work in these sort of hyper environment. And so I thought it was really interesting to see that, especially this week when the houses have been in the forefront of the news more so than the executive branch. Like, we're getting a little bit more of how their behavior and their thought processes. And it was just very apropos to the way that this happened this week, because it was like, I feel like this is exactly what I didn't think should have happened. Is that we're 6 strong to the end. Like, I feel like that's just what they were just saying last week, and why you wanted to break them up. Like, why would you start doing that?
Well, and the thing is, it really seemed like nobody really believed it either. I don't know. I think Troyzan and Michaela seemed, I don't know, like they were the ones. Well, okay, we'll get to that. Michaela, I think, at least in the tribal council, was advocating for that. But only, I think, it's not so much that she thought that's what was going to happen as much as she was pushing for that to be what happens rather than what she feared was going to happen. It was kind of
excluded them from the discussions. Like the behaviors were still the same, even if they didn't believe that they were always going to be 6 to the end. Their treatment of the minority group was identical to their treatment before, which I think is part of why I felt even more satisfied with the result, because it didn't just continue down that path and them just just try to vote that way and then sort of like reshuffle later. Like they took an opportunity to still do something that they felt they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So while I liked Zeke also and wish he was still on the show, I was kind of disappointed in their behavior. And so when they were able to Andrea was kind of able to get them to step back from that and say, hey, look, like, this isn't really going to happen like this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to start changing in 1 to 2 episodes. They don't say it that way, but anyway, so why don't we just do it now? Like, why even pretend and have the facade? And there was sort of the weak argument. I don't know if it was weak after what just happened to them of, well, if we just take one of them out this week, then we have like a super majority.
Mm-hmm.
And next time we don't have to worry about only one person flipping. But I think the reason why I think it was a weak argument was because the deck really is reshuffling every week. So I don't think only having to flip one person is really a big deal. Like, I think people literally do move in like voting blocks, and it didn't matter having a supermajority.
Well, it's a strategy that requires them to be a tighter 6 than they actually are. And the fact that they're discussing possibly voting out one of the 6 is almost proof right there that they're not as strong as they would need to be for that to be the right strategy.
Yep.
But yeah, I was very pleased with both Andrea and Suri in this episode. I thought they both played really well in this episode, because while you're right,
I'm going to let the dog out since he's going to go chase.
Okay.
I don't have to deal with him anymore.
All right. It's funny. I think my dog barks at the tiny little bits of sound coming through, even in my headphones, hearing your dog's collar jingle or something. Bark. Unless she's hearing something else that I'm not aware of. Anyway, though, like what you're saying in terms of the people now in the majority after the vote from last time taking that authority, and now they're in the majority, now they're in control, and their sort of approaches shifting. I think it was really Andrea and Suri that were kind of the people who did not, they seemed like they were never the ones that were thinking of it that way, right? Like, they recognized that fortune had swung in their favor, but they were thinking of it like, this is better for us now. What's our next step? As opposed to like, oh, great, we're the majority now. It was more like, no, we got what we wanted, so how do we get what we want next?
Yes.
And I really liked that.
Yeah. To just go off what you were saying about Michaela earlier, I was a little disappointed in her, especially considering the reason that she got voted out her first time, or the last time, I think she's only played one other time, was because she had thought things through so methodically that it kind of worried everybody.
Yeah.
And then to, just jump into this, okay, now we're 6, like, we're good for a while.
Well, no, I don't think that's what the problem was. I mean, she did vote for Zeke. I think she was just upset with having to vote for Zeke because she didn't want to vote for Zeke.
Okay.
So I think she was.
You think that statement was more of, this is what I would like to happen, not that I'm not strategically thinking through the fact that this is the right move.
Well, there's also an element too that they're trying to blindside Zeke, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he has to think that everybody else is planning this 6 strong. We're voting for. We're splitting between Ty and Sierra, because that seems to be what he thought the vote was going to be.
Yeah.
We're not splitting, but he voted for Ty. No, I'm sorry. He voted for Sierra. I've got the table in front of me, but the rows are so long at this point because of all the different votes. It makes it confusing. He voted for Sierra. He thought that everybody was voting for Sierra. And so the goal from everybody else who is not really voting for Sierra was to try to convince him that was still the plan. So yeah, I think she was
him and Ty.
Yeah.
Because they, of course, needed everybody else to think that Ty was it was going to be like the target so that they could get Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to give Sierra and Brad a target, and so they gave that Ty. So obviously Ty couldn't know that was the target. Yeah.
Right.
Well thought out. Well done.
Yeah. And so it was a well executed plan because it was a well executed plan to get out Sierra, but then it was a second well executed plan to actually take that and subvert it to blindside Zeke instead. And it worked for a smart and sometimes paranoid player. So good for them.
Very good timing,
Yeah. Well, exactly. And it was kind of like Aubrey said, even though she didn't really spearhead this, she was on board for sure. And, strike before they do. And, and Zeke said in his final words, yep, Andrea was right to do it because I would have come after her next inning instead if I was still there. So.
And he had told Sarah as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we had some, the winners kind of discussing the plans, but as we know in hindsight, that discussion of them as six didn't really ultimately hold much weight because they were really always more of a coalition than an alliance. Although it's funny with all this talk because they're definitely talking about the strategy that is reflected by what was called voting blocks in previous seasons, but nobody said those words, and it's kind of interesting that they're almost deliberately avoiding them.
Yeah.
We have B Fitz in the chat. Hello, saying I think Luna wants to go out and play with Mike's dog. Although, what the chat actually says is with Matt's dog, and then the next entry is, oops, I meant Mike. Why did I say Matt? That's a good question.
Yep.
Anyway, so where were we? I definitely feel scattered. I don't know how much that comes across.
Well, I've known you a long time, and you typically feel fairly scattered to me. So
I was gonna say I imagine that I'm more scattered than average all the time, but I'm more scattered than my own personal average tonight.
Yes, as we can see by the because I think you were just bragging on Twitter about how clean your apartment is.
Was I?
I think so.
Maybe recently. Although this is misleading because this is the rest of my apartment is more clean than this part of my counter would indicate.
Right. That's all I'm saying. It's not messy. It's just, but it is for what most people would consider clean. It is a little scattered.
Cluttered. Yeah.
Cluttered. Yeah. So like you are more scattered than usual. You're also a little more cluttered in your.
I have to be careful right now because I was just about to spin into a whole thing about one of the things I like about Blue Apron is it's encouraging me to keep my kitchen cleaner. And so let's not do that. Instead, let's talk about the reward challenge.
Let's do it. The reward challenge where that was just had an artifice in there just to get everybody really tired before the actual challenge.
Yeah. Well, I wonder too, just because I think they just made the word puzzle just much longer than before or than usual, but it ended up being so long that it's like you said, like all the rest of the challenge just is almost meaningless in comparison because the amount of lead one team has over another is almost meaningless compared to the amount of time it takes to do the puzzle. Where it's
100% meaningless when Jeff Probst fed them the answer. And you just had to be paying attention.
Yeah.
So I feel like they had to have known it would take a long time, and the idea behind the other part was just a cool looking way to get them really tired, to make it even more difficult to solve the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Like they couldn't have, they had to have known. Like even a well-rested person, like that is a long puzzle that didn't have. Like, it made sense in the context of what the game is, but it wasn't intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a phrase that they've like been saying a whole bunch. Like
no, and there's so many words that you can't just pick out specific letter combinations.
No.
You really just have to try whole big phrases, and it's like, okay, well, if there's one big word that seems like it might be in there, can we spell that? And if so, what letters are remaining after that? Yeah. It's kind of a shame just because I really like that whole mechanic of the team having to lift that chair and them scooting back and forth on the bench to grab the tiles. I like that. I kind of want it to be in a challenge where it matters more. But
yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, so you're right.
In that by being able to do it more efficiently, with basically Brad being like the anchor, their team was more well rested. So when Jeff gave them a hint an hour later, they were more apt to pick up on it.
Yeah.
See, it totally mattered.
Mm-hmm. Critical.
It was critical. I mean, I joke about it, but I don't think that didn't play a little bit of a part in it. Like,
sure. Well, yeah.
Like Brad, that's why they were able to start moving through it more quickly. Is that Brad? He did that. He was basically like the anchor on the tug of rope, the tug of war, where he was like had wrapped the rope around himself, and he would like do the heavy lifting, and the rest of them would just do the control.
Mm-hmm.
So they did end up being more well rested, and I think that probably left them a little more able.
Well, I mean, it's all an ingredient too. It's kind of is it completely irrelevant? Well, not completely, but certainly to the point where there's no way to really know for sure what the effect was, right?
Yeah, because that was a great strategy. Is like you.
Oh, sure. No,
instead of like everyone trying to pull the chair up, one guy was really pulling the chair up. The others were guiding.
Right.
And he was doing it because he had positioned himself differently, where he could he was walking it out as opposed to like tugging the rope, by having it like around his waist. Brad was able to have different leverage.
Yeah.
And so I want to give them credit for that strategy. So
I agree. I was saying I like that part of the challenge. I wish that there was a challenge where it would actually matter more.
That's why I'm trying to make it matter.
Well,
because I liked their technique, and I want to say that it helped them.
I liked their technique, and it definitely helped them in that part of the challenge. And we can argue, all right, fine, potentially in the rest, but it would have all fallen to pieces and been irrelevant if the other team had just guessed the words sooner. Especially given that Probst gave them all the clues at the same time. But yeah, so in any case, it was kind of funny for him to just the phrasing of his challenge chatter suddenly starting talking about like, yes, well, the game is always reinventing itself. There's always new challenges, always changing. And you kind of start going, oh, I get it. And then sure enough, related to that.
I think the other thing that helped them was that they had started to settle on that the fact that they could spell game and knowing that Game Changers was part of the name. Like, I think that was where they were like tuned to Jeff's chatter because he kept saying game. And we're like, oh, game. Oh, he's giving us he's giving us the clues. Like they connected that it was a clue faster because they had identified that word.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think has anything. I'm not going to try to tie that back into their thing. I think but I do.
They displayed better teamwork, which is how you win at games. No, okay, I'm teasing. Okay.
No, but I think there was a phenomenon. I don't remember. I don't remember what it's called, but there's like a psychological thing that they used to talk about a lot. Remember when airports used to page? And do you think page?
I mean, yes, I remember paging. I don't know the connection you're trying to draw yet.
No, so that's what I'm going to that, but I'm just making sure you remember that airports there used to just be that sort of drone in the background of an airport
The red zone is for loading and unloading only. There is no stopping in the white zone.
Not what I'm talking about, but it went like, would Christiana Ellis please pick up a white courtesy phone?
Yeah.
That would sort of be this thing. And you'd sit, and people would say, like, it's just like background noise. Like, you would never know. But the thing is, the phenomenon is that when you hear your name or a name that you recognize, all of a sudden it removes itself from the background noise, even in something as mundane as that. Like, you recognize your own name. You recognize something you know. I think this is very similar in that they had found a word that they knew was part of the puzzle. So when Probst said the word in something that just seemed like idle chatter, they connected that there was something in their minds. Like, it was the same phenomenon.
Yeah.
Their minds connected. This is a clue. And then they were like, okay. And they knew they were looking for an 11-letter word. So when he said reinventing, big word, and they already were looking, they were connected, waiting for a clue because of him using the word game that they had figured out. It all came together.
Yep.
So that's what I do think actually what helped them win, was that they had figured out enough of the puzzle to connect what Probst was saying. Because the other team, we noticed, didn't even start like working on what Probst was saying. They were still like baffled, like he was just idly saying something. They were listening to the normal page in the airport, whereas the other team heard their name. So
I'll confess that I watched the episode while also on cold medicine, so I don't think I followed what words they had already before as it was progressing. I don't think I had that level of detail in mind, but I'll take your word for it.
I have offered it up for you.
Yeah, there you go. And I definitely would not be a bit surprised, like you're saying, if they're kind of already have a couple of related words in mind, that they're going to pick up on his clues faster. That seems plausible to me.
Yes.
So in any case,
describe the phenomenon that I don't know what it's called, but I think that it's related.
It's called that thing where you recognize your own name.
Right. The fact that when you recognize something, you were able to pull it out of the mundane,
Yes, the Latin "thatimus thingimus." Okay, let's move on. Brad is very happy to have been on the winning team, not only because, of course, of the reward, but because he has the opportunity to try to talk strategy to some of the people that were not really otherwise approaching him for strategy talk. But, when everybody's kind of a captive audience around the table, everybody's kind of letting their guard down a little bit because they're on reward. So he takes the opportunity to talk sports a lot with Zeke. And
well, I think we learned from Zeke's last time around that he's like a huge Oklahoma Sooner football fan.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that until this came up again.
And in one of the
smart, Brad. It was smart of Brad to have remembered that Zeke was a big fan and just sort of randomly throw that out of like, hey, the only thing that would make this better is if we were watching Florida play Oklahoma in 2007. And Zeke's like, I was at that game. It was so awesome. It was a good move where Brad was at the time.
Right. Well, and especially since, as we saw, it kind of got Andrea riled up again. Not that she wasn't sort of already, but Andrea was in a place where, okay, I was mad at Zeke, but he did just help us get out Debbie. But now I'm seeing him cozying up to Brad. I don't know if I like that.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I want to cluck my tongue at Andrea just a little bit for still having this really significant emotional component in her strategy here. But that said, that piece aside, she got what she wanted pretty effectively.
Yes.
But
from Brad's perspective, Brad is now shifted into the, as long as it's not me mode, because it's looking much more difficult for them because it's a 6-4. He's doing the right thing. Like, he found a way to instantly bond with one of the more strategic-minded people on the majority. So, wow, Yeah, and in the long term, like if Brad ends up making it to the end, like Zeke's going to be more inclined to vote for him because they now have a bond.
Mm-hmm.
So while it didn't end up benefiting Brad in this episode, I think it was the right move for him.
Well, agreed. Especially, he wouldn't necessarily have had this in mind or even been aware of it, but to be sure, kind of poking at that wound of Andrea's a little bit maybe made it more likely that Zeke went home instead of Sierra, which is definitely good for Brad.
Definitely good for him, yeah, because now, he still has Sierra, who he works well with, Ty, who he works well with, and Tarzan, who he works well with. Now, all of a sudden,
so now it's exactly the situation that we talked about, whether or not it was a weak argument for this time. It is now that situation where any talk of this, former 6, now 5, only needs one person to switch, which, is probably
what I think is more likely to happen, and it feels like the previews bear this out, but you never can trust those, is a true, now that this has gone kind of back and forth and it really hasn't, those majorities and minorities have literally meant nothing. I think there's going to be a true reshuffling of the deck. And this will be, okay, the voting block, like, okay, who makes the most sense right now for a group of us to target, and we really only need 4 to 5 people, and we just pick whatever makes the most sense. I think that's what's probably going to happen, and I think that's part of why I think Andrea and Suri made the right move in pushing this forward, is that they saw that this was going to Zeke was going to push this agenda. Zeke was very big on that type of play. So they forced the agenda this time and used it to get rid of Zeke. And I think they are going to be able to navigate that very well, Suri in particular. Andrea has made a little bit more of a lightning rod that may draw some of that.
Well, Andrea has definitely had her name written down a couple of times already.
And talked about, and she did just win an individual immunity, which I don't think, by the way, we haven't discussed because we haven't gotten to that point. I'm not convinced that wasn't part of the equation in her boldness.
No, I agree.
For one of her own. Yeah. Her own,
Sure. No, I agree 100%. I mean, I think it's one thing to say whether or not she would want to vote out Zeke regardless, but you're right. Her boldness in pushing for it against opposition.
Right.
So back at camp after the reward, Sierra talks about being exhausted, and she says she's still trying to figure out what happened at tribal council. And I'm thinking, what's to figure out? I mean, someone flipped and Sarah raised her hand and said, "Yep, it was me. Does anyone want to talk about it?" So I'm not sure what it is that she's. I mean,
like more of an expression of I'm still disappointed in what happened.
Well, it's one thing.
Yeah, some of the onus off of you for like not seeing that it was going to happen by saying I still can't even figure it out. I can't even process it.
Yeah.
So well, I don't think you legitimately didn't know what happened.
Well, no, I agree. I guess I was just confused by what she meant. Like, what was it? Yeah. So, but I mean, I agree. I'm not trying to say, I'm not like calling her dumb or anything. I'm just saying I found that a curious comment, because it's one thing to say, I don't know what I'm going to do now because I'm kind of left with no good options. Like, if that makes sense to try to figure out. Thinking back on like, well, what maybe could I have done to prevent this from happening before? Sure. But that neither of those is actually what she said. So I guess I was just confused. Not that it's a big deal. Anyway.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
We have Ty and Troyzan kind of agreeing to be honest with each other in the sense that if either of them gets word that the other one is going to go, they'll tell each other. although they're not being completely honest with each other because the topic of idols does come up, and Ty does not mention that he has 2 still.
And Troyzan voted for Ty.
I
feel like he didn't tell him that was a thing that was going to happen. But we didn't see it. He may have, but
yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at these rows again. It's okay. Yes, Troyzan voted for Ty. That might have been something that they did talk about, though. You know what I mean? Like,
hey, I heard your name's coming up. You're probably going home.
Yeah.
No, because Ty has 2 idols.
Well,
if Troyzan had told Ty that he was the target, Ty would have used an idol.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Except unless Ty knew something about what was likely to happen. Although he did still vote for Sierra.
Yeah, I was super level-headed about stuff like that. Like he would have been able to process
who knows what's going on with him. I'm just saying that we don't know for sure what they talked about and what they didn't. I think you have a valid point.
I feel like the evidence is strong that Troyzan and nobody indicated to Ty that he was the target. Because if they had, Ty has the ability now to be trigger happy on his idols because he has 2.
Yeah.
So if he had any nervousness, he can just pull it. And I don't feel that he was in on the other one since he voted for Sierra, not Zeke. So I do not think. I think that evidence points to that Troyzan did not tell him about it. So further to your point that Ty did not tell Troyzan that he has 2 idols, and Troyzan did not tell Ty that everybody was going to vote for him to save their own ass. This was sort of an interesting, in hindsight, it was not the honest conversation the 2 have ever had. You know?
True. Something about hanging on to the idols that Ty didn't even mention, though, is the added benefit, not only of just having it for yourself, but also just keeping them out of the hands of other people. That's important.
That's an interesting way to have thought about it that I had never really considered is that, yeah, if you use it, it gets reburied essentially, right? And someone else can have it. Yeah. Whereas you maintain them. You know, so
I mean, how many dumb votes have been made over the years because people are worried that someone has an idol?
Yeah.
So being able to know with relative degree of certainty that someone so and so doesn't have an idol, even if you can't explain why you know that, but definitely a useful thing. So let's see. We have here Andrea and Sari talking about the idea of getting out Sierra, which is sort of like the default plan based on the idea of the majority alliance versus the idea of taking out Zeke, who's a threat. This is where I noted that it was like he had made a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
They want to approach Sarah, but worry that Officer Sarah is touchy about Zeke, won't want to vote for him. Meanwhile, Sarah says that she's not worried about Zeke because she knows how she wants to deal with him. She's got backup, and it seems like whatever her sort of plan A is, sounds like she was getting ready to, when the time comes, use her vote stealing to make that happen when there's fewer people around.
Yep.
Which is not a terrible plan, although what it strikes me as is a plan that's kind of made in the abstract as opposed to talking with the real people who are around you and what they're doing. Which it doesn't make it bad, it just makes it hypothetical.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, from her perspective, if she feels like she can trust Zeke, why vote him out over someone she doesn't trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think her whole argument was, I feel like, even once Zeke starts doing these things that other people are complaining about, I will still be on his side. So I would like for him to be around.
Mm-hmm.
That loses a little bit of steam when they're like, hey, Zeke is going to do these things to us, and we don't want that to happen. You can't be like, no, Zeke's never going to do that, because you know in your heart he is, because he told you he was. And so, yeah, it would be good for you to keep him around, but at what expense? You know, and for her, what I like that recognized that she had just done something that had aggravated a large portion of the, the jury, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
If she goes and doesn't, follow through with who she's now aligned herself with, now you're not making big moves. You're just a loose cannon, and I liked that she kind of backed off of it, It was like, look, Zeke's not worth that much to me, like I'm going to go with this group now. I'm going to maintain my advantage. And I thought, yeah. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately that was the decision both Sarah and Michaela made, which was essentially that of the two different choices they could make, Zeke is a threat. Yeah, but Michaela, it was when it came to the final tribal council, Sarah pitched it as her and Michaela were the undecideds that were going to be the deciding.
Oh, yeah, I get you. Yeah. And Michaela should have had the advantage.
Yeah, that's true too. But Serene now knows about Sarah's advantage. Yes. Sarah revealed that in order to build some trust, which is, again, a good idea. That's part of the power of having something like that, is you can use it in kind of two ways.
Yeah, I agree that it is a good idea. It still gave me a little bit of pause, because Marie is so good.
Yeah, that's true.
At just maneuvering, like she is. I mean, and I had forgotten how. Like I think I said this exact same thing last week, and I watched it again here. Like her power of persuasion, is. I mean, she just has that down.
What it makes me think of here is the whole idea of, like, if you're playing poker and you don't know who the sucker at the table is, it's you, that sort of thing. And the reason I think of that is just the idea that I think most often the power of revealing something like that is when you hope to manipulate someone with that information. But if you are not kind of in control enough of the situation, you will be manipulated back. And I think that's definitely, this could very well be that kind of situation for Sarah and Suri, is that Suri would just kind of recognize, like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing. Let's just tweak that in my favor then.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm just gonna shelve it. Maybe I use it. Maybe I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's nothing. Like, and that's one of the things which I think is what keeps impressing me about Suri is not just her soft touch and the way that she does these things, but everything doesn't have to be like something that you make a decision on. Like,
well, she's got a confidence to her in the social game.
And she knows that she doesn't have to use everything that comes her way. It's not like every piece of information, which is sort of the opposite of what you were worried about with Andrea earlier on, is like, oh, Brad and Zeke together, like, oh dear, like, gotta process that, like, holy shit, like, now they're, what's Zeke doing over there? Whereas Serene will be like, Brad and Zeke getting cozy. I'm gonna register that, and if that becomes something that's relevant later, I will know that happened. But I'm not going to make any judgments on whether that is a good or a bad thing. That is just a thing.
Yeah.
It's very, very stoic in philosophy.
Yeah.
Where, because I think that is one of the core points of stoicism is that, there are not good things and bad things don't happen. Things just happen. How we decide to perceive them is the good or the bad. The things just occur.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what she's looking at. Like there's all of these things happen in Survivor, and what I choose to ascribe to them is what it does for me. I don't react to everything.
So Zeke talks to Sarah too, and talks to her. His plan is to bring in Brad and Troyzan and have a final 5 with those 4 and Michaela. And Zeke tells the camera he trusts Sarah, but he doesn't trust Andrea and Aubrey, which is smart now, but only in the sense that they don't trust him because he preemptively didn't think they would trust him. Yeah, but
set up a scenario where they would not trust him.
Yeah, exactly. But so this is kind of the 2 choices that Sarah is presented with. He does go ahead and approach Brad and Troyzan to say, look, I can't make you a part of it this time, but I'm trying to orchestrate something that will make you part of it next time. And, they're on board because as long as it's not them getting voted for, right? And that pretty much brings us to the immunity challenge. I love this challenge. It's so great because the dominoes, but also the wobbly platform where they have to high step over the bars or else they knock everything over. I mean, I'm sure it's a huge pain in the ass to do, but boy, it's just a neat challenge. It's very visually interesting. It's dramatic.
Yeah, I love the fact that they're like the mechanism where there aren't enough dominoes, like where it's like they figured out exactly how many dominoes you need to like space them at this exact, like the challenge design is phenomenal.
Yeah,
because it is so there's so little margin for error in what the amount of dominoes they give you. You can't get away with stacking them too close because they just don't give you enough.
Right.
And I love it.
It's great. It's a great addition because you could easily imagine them just not putting a limit on the number of dominoes or just making sure they would have enough to do whatever they wanted. But it is, you're right, it's this extra layer of drama when someone gets close to the end and realizes they've run out and now they have to go and redo everything. And that makes it really interesting.
Yes. To that point, though, I thought Andrea's, whether it was a strategy or just ended up happening, I think that is the better way to go, is to stack them too close.
Work backwards.
And find out that you've run out, and then work backwards. Because if you do it the other way, and you go they're too far apart, then and you try it, like now you have to restack everything.
Yeah.
If you try and miss because they're not close enough, you start over. But if you set them up and you realize before having touched one that you are too close together, you can start to like work that out.
Yeah.
I thought it was the right way to go.
I agree completely. And it struck me as more of a strategy of opportunity in the sense that, like she wasn't planning to run out. Right. But it worked out that she had been fast enough in setting them up to begin with. Then when she ran out, and her response to that was definitely good. She did a great job. So she was
especially because you still have to like high step even as you're like resetting them. Like it's still annoying. Yeah.
Right. I think we only saw Brad knock them down, but it might be that a couple of other people did. I don't remember seeing anyone else knock theirs over.
People who weren't in contention may have knocked them down. Yeah.
But Andrea was the first to really even make an attempt to win, in the sense of saying, I think I've got it. Let's roll them over and see. And sure enough, she did. So good for her. It was a good moment for her. This is a good episode for her. And I'm really kind of excited by the possibility that this will be kind of an inflection point for her game, which is not to say that she wasn't playing before, but I would really like to see her become like one of the big threats, like on track to win in this at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I could see a change of trajectory potentially leading to her winning.
Yeah, and I would be happy with that. But I think I said this either, if I didn't say it last week, I thought it last week or maybe I said it. I think I did. I think I know. I think I said it 2 weeks ago before Debbie. That Debbie was really the only one that I didn't really.
Debbie and Trizan were the two that we kind of talked about.
That was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, yeah, Trizan. I mean, Trizan's not going to win this game like that.
No.
I see zero scenario in which that happens.
Maybe that's the game changer twist. No, I'm kidding.
I don't think so.
No.
But everybody else, like I'm fine with. Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for this group that used to be the minority and is now the majority, or was the reshuffle. Because I like Aubrey, I like Andrea, I liked Zeke, even though he didn't win. I like Michaela, but I'm cool with Ty winning, Brad even. Sierra's probably my least favorite, but I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, I just don't have any.
Well,
I'm not particularly rooting for her one way or the other.
She needs to make a move, because for too long she was trying to just ride comfortably in the co-pilot seat, and now she's in scramble mode. She needs to kind of get the game back under her feet. If she's going to have any chance. Aubrey, I like Aubrey, but if she's going to win, she's also going to need to start making moves. For too long,
Michaela's not really in a position to win without, doing something to raise above.
Right.
Right now she's kind of known as like the negative Nancy. Like that's a hard way to win when everybody on the jury thinks you're, said negative Nancy. Like it's tricky to navigate that if you're going to end up with somebody who is, going to confidently say things. And if anybody who's any good ends up with Michaela in the final three, they're going to push her buttons and get her to start saying the things that rub everybody the wrong way in the final tribal council, and just ensure that she doesn't get any of the votes. Like,
right. Yeah, I do like Michaela, but she would have a hard time, I think, unless she can really make a move of her own that's not just part of someone else's move.
Yeah, I think. Oh, and I didn't mention, I think Sari also has a very good chance because.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
Because of exactly that soft touch that we're talking about, like she doesn't have to go into final tribal and make like a hard case. Like, she can persuade everybody the way that she always does, and just be like, yeah, just.
I mean, honestly, what my gut tells me right now is that it's Andrea or Sari, whichever one of them pulls it off. That sounds the most. That's kind of who I would pick as a favorite right now. What would be interesting, though, that I'm not sure I can say, would they turn on each other before the end, or would they both be in the final tribal?
I would love to see Andrea and Sari plus one, anyone. Just because I think that it would be they just have very different styles.
Yeah.
They're both very good and very smart. And Sari is a little bit more of a social manipulator. But Andrea is a little bit more of a challenge threat, and is seen as more of a strategic planner. Even though
she's got a little bit more of a dominant personality,
right? But she's also seen as more of a forward thinker, whereas Sari is seen as more of a reactive.
Right.
Not that she's bad at being a reactive, but like she's seen as reacting to events and putting things into place once they happen to her. Whereas Andrea is looking to make things happen for her. They just have very different styles, and they're both very good at them. Yeah, I would like to see that clash.
I agree. So let's see. Coming out of the immunity challenge, we have Andrea talking about really being kind of impatient to get Zeke out. She talks with Sari. They talk about the need to blindside Zeke. And I think this is actually where Sari talks about Officer Sarah. But it's kind of funny that they're just literally hanging out at the water cooler and all the people they need to talk to just come by like they're taking turns. It's funny. Sierra comes in and she is really just very blunt about saying, look, I know I'm in trouble here, so I will do whatever you guys want. You just tell me, I will do it, and as long as it's not me. And it's like, yep, okay. And that's honestly the right thing to say, because I think, since Sierra was potentially the real target, but we know that they are looking for an alternative to that, confidence that Sierra is not going to be a wild card to mess up your plan is key. Otherwise, you might just start thinking, maybe it's just easier to go ahead and get Sierra off now and do whatever we're planning later. But then, let's see. Sarah comes up. They just really kind of straight up are saying, we want to get out Zeke. Sarah doesn't want to, but she also, and this is, I think, ultimately the key, she talks about, but I still want to play with Sri and Andrea, and I don't want to make a decision that's going to have them mad at me. Don't want to get in hot water is what she says.
I mean, you can just see right there the clout that those two kind of have.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a great, everything we were just talking about in that little interaction is perfect. Like, Andrea comes and says, I want Zeke to go. Sri processes the information, thinks about all of her alternatives, and says, you know what? That makes sense. I'm going to help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sarah, who doesn't want Zeke to go, talks to the two of them and is like, man, like, if the two people who got it figured out, this is what they think, I got to go with them. Even though I want something different. And it's like, that's exactly why they can beat you.
Right.
In the game. So that I'm glad that, that's great. Like I said, a little illustration of everything we just talked about.
So Aubrey is on board, not only in being willing to make moves, but also in the strike before they do sense. Michaela, as we kind of previously talked about, doesn't like the idea of sacrificing this +2 numbers advantage, but which I think, again, is like, in the abstract is a good point, but with this group of people, you weren't going to be able to hold on to the 6 anyway. But she does trust Zeke and doesn't want Zeke to go, and so that's her hesitation there. But ultimately, I think what we realize is that she probably makes the decision for the same reason Sarah does, which is, I don't want the group decision to be Zeke, but I'm not going to go against Andrea and Sari if that's what they really want.
Right. And I get it. Like, they get it because Zeke has told them that he wants to start playing this way. Like, Zeke has made it clear that he has no intention of sticking with this alliance.
Right. Yeah.
You're gonna try to pretend that this alliance is something like that. That argument is lost immediately because the guy who you're voting for doesn't believe in it. And has made that very clear. And so I think that was part of it. And
so
probably just Zeke had a lot of challenges in this season, and I think he made his, I don't want to say free agency, but his idea of the shuffling of the decks and all of that. I think he played that hand a little too early, and he went after somebody in his own alliance who was emotionally triggered to come after him, yet also strategically strong enough to last.
Yeah.
He made the wrong call in going after Andrea that early.
Right. I think it was kind of twofold. It was partly moving too early and partly choosing Sierra to try to approach in order to do that, because Sierra didn't want to hear it and immediately ratted him out.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the two ways that plan went wrong. But again, I mean, he said at the time that he would rather go out because he made a move too early than to go out because you took too long and didn't get to do it.
Totally agree. And I think that's why he leaves the game ultimately satisfied with the way that he played.
Yeah.
I am happy in that he left the game for a reason based on his play, not based on what Varner did. Was that, I mean, we can't ever say whether that wasn't in the back of people's minds about not wanting to go to the end with him, this and that. But it was not.
It didn't feel like that was it.
It didn't feel like it. It wasn't touched. It was just ostensibly like he was able to maneuver, like to go from, yes, there was the first sort of hangover episode where, people felt like, oh, well, I defend you, so I felt like you should have my back a little bit stronger. But that was literally the extent of it.
Yeah.
And that makes me very happy.
Yeah, I agree. Although tying into that just a little bit is how I got spoiled on the result of this episode before I got a chance to watch it, which was, and I spotted an article that was actually an interview with Zeke talking about, this we talked about this question when we talked about the episode that had the outing in it, of the question of should Survivor have even aired it, right? And we can't help but think that, we imagine that Zeke would have input into that. And then so I saw an article that was talking about Zeke saying he really never even considered having them not air it. And he's, wouldn't have chosen for it to go down that way. But once it did, he wouldn't have wanted it to not air. And
I have so much respect for Zeke, in the way that he's handled all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, for him, his understanding of how, and his just composure with how all that happened. He didn't want it to happen that way, but he handled it like a motherfucker when it did. And then he didn't even consider this being a thing that he would want to protect or stop or change.
Well, I mean,
and they want to go into and finish the episode out as Zeke the Survivor player, not Zeke the trans Survivor player. Exactly what he wanted, he got. They voted him out because he was a strategic threat that was going to come after one of the people who had now regained a little bit of confidence in the alliance and had immunity and knew that he was a strategic threat.
Yeah.
It had literally nothing to do with that. And so he got exactly what he had hoped for. Everything about how he has handled it, how it went down. I am super happy with the whole way this was happening. I don't feel it was exploitative at all for them to air it. I think it was,
I think they handled it honestly really well, given that, it was not a great thing to have had happen, but the whole thing where they, they had the sort of the press team ready to address the issue in a sensitive way. Statements from GLAAD and stuff like that as soon as the episode aired and all of that stuff. I think they handled it pretty well, and it's certainly an upsetting enough thing that you can understand why some people might have argued that they shouldn't have aired it. But it's nice to also have specific confirmation from Zeke to say, look, I always knew this was a possibility that it would come out when I decided to come on a national TV show, and when I decided to come on it again. So it was something I was prepared to have come out. and I wouldn't have chosen for it to happen this way, and I wasn't going to volunteer it at all, but given that it did happen in the game, I wouldn't have wanted them to not air it.
Okay.
And so it's nice to have that confirmation.
Totally. And it, and there's some, again, just to be selfish about it, I'll have to admit this is a selfish thing. Going back to what we talked about when it happened and what I had hoped the good that would come out of this, I feel invigorated by the fact that it was not only the good that I had hoped for, but almost even better. Like not only did it go and it was an example for how to like compose yourself and a exciting thing from a societal standpoint when that there are parts of the country where that has become such a hot issue, and this was handled so well by his network there, his compatriots and other competitors, and he was just such an example for anybody who is looking at him at that way. But then he also got what he wanted, in that he didn't become like he's not what I think he would never have said is, I don't want to be Caitlyn Jenner.
Right.
I don't want to be like this famous person who's like the icon for this, when it's like, because they're famous and they're this, like it's not the real journey. Like it's not a real journey for them, but it's not the real journey that most people see. Just like most famous people aren't the real journey for any of us.
Right.
And to see him not become that, and to be treated as an absolute equal, and to be treated as Zeke the Survivor player, which is exactly what he wanted. Like it just, I'm filled with joy, even though he got voted out, that like it was for that reason.
Yeah.
I didn't say that at the beginning, but it is part of it. Like I'm glad that that's why he was chosen. Not, oh my God, Zeke's going to beat us in the end because he's has this whole story of Varner outing him. Like everybody's going to give him the money.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Zeke's going to get us out. We need to get Zeke out. That was literally the end. So anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. The only thing in the tribal council specifically that I really feel like talking about is Debbie flipping off Sarah from the jury.
I mean, that was.
I just thought it was funny.
It was funny, but petty. Like.
Well, yeah, but
especially to see with, like, again, the not to harp on what we just did, but the class with which Zeke left the game.
Yeah.
Versus that, like that just made her seem almost, I mean, like trashy. Like, I know she's not, but that just like felt trashy.
I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like exactly what I would have expected her to do. Because she had kind of a smile on her face. Didn't seem like a really mean-spirited, bitter.
Yeah, I guess I just
gesture.
don't get her. Like, I.
Yeah, she's weird. She's weird for sure.
Yeah, I've just never. I just, her wavelength, like I've just never really like been able to figure out like whether she's truly mad about things or whether she's like truly mad but like tries to like make it a joke and laugh at it, but she's actually really mad, or whether like she's just trying to make a joke. Like I can't really figure it out. Like this felt the same way as like when she like looked at Brad on the beach and was like, I trusted you and you totally broke my heart. And she kind of like chuckled.
Like yeah.
Made a joke, but she seemed legitimately that mad. Like I didn't know how to take it, and this was the same way. Like, are you just being like classless and flipping her off? Or do you find this, are you trying to be funny? Like or are you somewhere in between? And I don't get it. So
the impression I got is kind of like how if you had a bunch of people playing, I'm imagining pickup basketball for some reason, even though that's not exactly something I'm imagining pickup basketball on a TV show about 20-something guys, right? As opposed to any kind of a real life thing. It's the kind of trash talk that the guys on a 20-somethings sitcom would give each other while they play pickup basketball. That's what it felt like to me. Sarah confessed, yes, it was me.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's the image that came to mind, but there you go.
No, I'm not disagreeing with it. It's just that is a little bit to process, because that is not anything I was expecting to have it described as.
Well, because like I first just had the image of pickup basketball, but then what I was realizing is like I don't have really that much personal actual experience with people who play pickup basketball. Mostly what I have is when I've seen people do it on TV or in movies or something.
It's obviously a fairly accurate, yet maybe inflamed based on the situation, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so in any case, that was kind of the impression that I got, was that it was mad, but in a competitive way, not in a like mean-spirited personal way.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting on board with your, because there are times like I don't now, but when I was in my 20s, I used to play a lot of pickup basketball, and there were times where like the line was blurred between whether you were legitimately mad at somebody or whether it was just trash talk, and ultimately like you always like came down from it, but because you're in that heightened competitive state, like there are times when you felt like you were legitimately mad. So
yeah. There might be some of that too, because there is the element of like what you did just like potentially cost me $1 million, that sort of thing.
yeah,
But
I mean, like I said, like there are times when you're frustrated with somebody to pick up basketball, like there are times where you feel in the moment like you are that mad just because you're in that heightened state.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of everybody else starts like looking at you weird, you calm down and you sort of back off and you remember you're actually friends, and
Yeah.
or if you're strangers, you remember that you're not going to fight a stranger in a gym. And so everybody sort of kind of backs off and laughs about it, like, "Ha, yeah, that was cool that you elbowed me in the junk. Like, yeah, that was really funny how you did that." And you're like still kind of mad, and then like 2 days later you've forgotten about it. But
yeah.
So anyway,
looks like next time we get the loved ones visit. Lots of talk about trust and alliances. And also, again, I liked Zeke's final words. Is like obviously he's disappointed, he's frustrated, but kind of ultimately says, "Yeah, but Andrea was right to take me out because I was going to take her out." So there you have it. And it's like the emphasis of the of what Aubrey said. You strike them before they strike you.
Yeah. It all kind of went down that way. So.
Yep. All right. So I think that probably does it for this time.
I believe so.
Yeah. And so we'll be back next week. We're getting close to the end. We're still, I think, based on our previous discussion, we're due for another double elimination at some point or something.
Yeah. I mean, we only
have too many people. There's still 9.
Yeah, we don't have that many episodes left, so we'll see how they handle it.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching. Remember, if you want to leave a comment like Daisy did, or participate in the live chat like B Fitz did, you can find links for all this stuff at christianaellis.com. So talk to you guys later.
See you later.